The horizon drifted slowly toward the massive space station that hung in the darkness like a silver wheel. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back as he watched the structure grow larger on the main view screen. After 3 months of travel through deep space, humanity was about to make its formal introduction to the Galactic Council. "Distance to docking port?" Jake asked. 2 kilometers and closing, Lieutenant Kyle Chen replied from the communications station. "They've confirmed our approach vector. We're cleared for Bay 7. Jake nodded. He had commanded military vessels for 15 years, but this mission felt different. The Horizon was not a warship. It carried no weapons beyond basic defense systems. Instead, it held Earth's hopes for peaceful contact with alien civilizations. "All crew members to stations," Jake said into the ship-wide channel. "We dock in 10 minutes. Dr. Sophie Blake entered the bridge, adjusting her uniform. She was Earth's leading xenobiologist and had spent the past year preparing for this moment. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her eyes showed both excitement and nervousness. "Any word on who will greet us?" Sophie asked. "Ambassador Hartman is handling the formal introductions," Jake said. "We should see representatives from at least a dozen species." Sophie moved to stand beside him, staring at the station. "It's hard to believe we're really here. 6 months ago, we didn't even know other intelligent life existed, and now we're about to walk into a room full of aliens," Kyle added with a slight grin. "My grandmother would never believe this." The docking procedure went smoothly. The Horizon settled into its assigned bay with barely a tremor. Jake led his senior staff through the airlock and into the station proper. The corridor beyond took Jake's breath away. The walls were made of some crystalline material that seemed to glow with its own light. Strange symbols marked doorways and passages. The air smelled different, though not unpleasant. It reminded Jake of ozone after a thunderstorm. "This way," a voice said. Jake turned to see a being that looked almost human, except for the pale blue skin and large black eyes. The translator device on Jake's collar buzzed slightly before converting the alien's words into English. "I am Counselor Vex Tar of the Prin Collective," the alien said. "Welcome to Unity Station. Ambassador Hartman is waiting in the greeting hall." They followed Vex Tar through several corridors. Sophie kept glancing around, trying to take in every detail. Kyle walked with the careful awareness of a military officer in unknown territory. The greeting hall was enormous. The ceiling stretched upward at least 50 meters, and the room could have held several hundred people. Currently, it contained about 40 aliens of various species, all standing in small groups and talking quietly. Ambassador Lisa Hartman approached them immediately. She was a tall woman in her 50s, with gray hair and sharp eyes. She had been a diplomat for 30 years and had volunteered for this mission the moment it was announced. "Captain Morrison, Dr. Blake, Lieutenant Chen," Lisa said formally. "Welcome. Let me introduce you to our hosts." The next hour passed in a blur of introductions. Jake met insect-like beings, reptilian creatures, and one species that looked like living crystal formations. Each one greeted the humans with what seemed like genuine curiosity. Some seemed nervous. Others appeared cautiously optimistic. "Your species is quite young," one alien told Sophie. "Most civilizations do not achieve faster than light travel for at least 10,000 years of recorded history. You managed it in less than 6. We had good motivation," Sophie replied diplomatically. But Jake noticed something odd. Despite the friendly greetings, there was tension in the air. The aliens kept glancing toward one empty section of the hall. When Jake asked Vextar about it, the alien's face went even paler. "That area is reserved," Vextar said quietly, "for the Zarkoth Empire." "I haven't heard of them," Jake said. Vextar's eyes widened. "You will. Everyone does." Later, during a brief pause in the introductions, Lisa gathered the human delegation in a quiet corner. "I've been learning about the political situation here," she said in a low voice. "There's something I need to tell you about the Zarkoth Empire." "The ones with the reserved section?" Kyle asked. Lisa nodded. "They control over 200 worlds. Every species here either pays them tribute or lives in fear of them. The Council invited us partially because they hope humanity might provide some balance to the Empire's power. What makes them so dangerous? Sophie asked. They're warriors, Lisa explained. But more than that, they're masters of psychological warfare. They project fear somehow. Their mere presence can cause panic in most species. They've conquered worlds without firing a shot, just by showing up and demonstrating their power. Jake frowned. That seems unlikely. I would have agreed yesterday, Lisa said. But I've seen the recordings. They're terrifying. Even watching videos of them made several council members physically ill. When do we meet them? Jake asked. In about 30 minutes, Lisa said. They're making a formal entrance for the ceremony. The council wanted them to arrive after us, so we could settle in first. Sophie looked worried. Should we be concerned? The council assures me they won't attack, Lisa said. But they will try to intimidate us. They do it to everyone. It's how they establish dominance. Kyle straightened. We're representing Earth. We can't show weakness. Agreed, Jake said. But let's stay diplomatic. We're here to make friends, not enemies. As the time approached, the other aliens in the hall began to move toward the walls, creating a wide, empty space in the center. Some were visibly shaking. Others had changed color, which Sophie whispered might be a fear response. They're really scared, Sophie said quietly to Jake. This isn't an act. Counselor Vextar approached them again. You should move back, he said urgently. When the Empire arrives, you do not want to be in their path. What happens if we stay here? Kyle asked. Vextar looked horrified. Please, just move. For your own safety. Reluctantly, the humans moved toward the wall with everyone else. Jake felt like he was watching a play. With everyone knowing their parts except him, how dangerous are they really? Jake asked Vextar. The alien's voice dropped to a whisper. They conquered my world in a single day. Not with ships or weapons. They simply landed. And everyone surrendered. The fear was too much to bear. We had no choice. That's impossible, Sophie said. I wish it were, Vextar replied. A deep gong sounded through the hall. The lights dimmed slightly. Every alien in the room seemed to hold their breath. They're here, Vextar whispered. The far doors began to open slowly. Smoke poured into the room, thick and gray. A deep rumbling sound echoed through the space. Like thunder or distant drums, the other aliens pressed back against the walls even further. Jake felt his heart rate increase, but not from fear. From anticipation. After all the warnings and terror, he was genuinely curious what could inspire such dread. The smoke swirled, the drumming grew louder, and through the haze, the Zarkoth Empire made their entrance. Jake's first thought was that something had gone wrong with his eyes. His second thought was that this had to be a joke. Beside him, Sophie made a small choking sound. Kyle turned away quickly, his shoulders shaking, because marching through the smoke, in perfect formation, wearing elaborate armor that gleamed in the dim light, came the most fearsome warriors in the galaxy. They were 3 feet tall and looked exactly like hamsters. Jake Morrison had seen many strange things in his military career. He had witnessed experimental engines explode, survived a hull breach in deep space, and once watched his tactical officer accidentally eject himself in an escape pod during a drill. But nothing had prepared him for this moment. The Zarkoth warriors continued their march into the greeting hall. There were at least 20 of them, arranged in precise rows. Each one wore armor that looked expensive and well-crafted, with elaborate designs etched into the metal plates. They carried weapons that hummed with energy. Their formation was perfect, and they were absolutely adorable. Jake bit the inside of his cheek hard. He could not laugh. He was a captain, a representative of Earth, and he was standing in front of dozens of alien species who were genuinely terrified. Laughing would be the worst possible diplomatic mistake, but they looked so much like hamsters, round bodies, tiny legs, small arms clutching oversized weapons. They even had the same cheek pouches that puffed out when they breathed. Their armor had been designed to look intimidating, with spikes and dark colors, but it just made them look like pets dressed up for Halloween. Beside him, Sophie was trembling. Her face had turned red, and her eyes watered. She had pressed one hand over her mouth and was staring intently at the floor. "Don't," Jake whispered. "Do not laugh." "I'm trying," Sophie said through clenched teeth. Her voice came out high and strained. The Zarkoth reached the center of the hall and stopped. The drums grew louder. More smoke poured in from somewhere. The lighting shifted to cast dramatic shadows. Then their leader stepped forward. Supreme Commander Thoxor was slightly larger than the others, perhaps 3.5 feet tall. His armor was black and gold, with a cape that dragged on the floor behind him. He wore what appeared to be a crown with sharp points. His whiskers twitched as he surveyed the room. When he spoke, his actual voice was a high-pitched squeak. But the translator on his collar did its best to make him sound deep and menacing. "Behold," Thoxor announced, his translated voice booming through the hall. "The Zarkoth Empire has arrived. Let all who stand here know the power and might of our glorious civilization." Every alien in the room bowed or lowered themselves in some way. Some dropped to the floor entirely. Jake noticed that several were shaking. And not from cold. The human delegation remained standing. Toxor's small black eyes scanned the room and landed on them. He began walking forward, his tiny legs moving quickly to cover the distance. His warriors followed behind him in formation. "You must be the humans," Thoxor said. The translator made his voice sound like gravel grinding together, but Jake could hear the original squeaky voice underneath it. "The newest children of the galaxy. How fortunate that you have arrived in time to witness our magnificence." Ambassador Lisa Hartman stepped forward smoothly. She had composed her face into a neutral diplomatic expression, though Jake could see a muscle twitching in her jaw. "Supreme Commander Thoxor," Lisa said with a slight bow of her head. "On behalf of humanity, I greet you and welcome this opportunity to establish relations between our peoples." Thoxor stopped about 5 feet away from them. He tilted his head back to look up at Lisa, which required him to lean quite far backward. "Relations," he repeated. The word came out with clear disdain. "You speak as if you have a choice in the matter. All species eventually understand their place in the order we have created." Behind Jake, Kyle Chen made a sound that might have been a cough, or might have been a laugh, desperately disguised as a cough. Jake did not turn around to check. "We come in peace," Lisa continued. "Earth hopes to learn from the Galactic Council and contribute to the wider community." "Peace," Thoxor said. He began to circle around them slowly, his warriors spreading out to form a ring. "Peace is what the weak beg for when they face the strong. Tell me, humans, do you know what happens to species who refuse to acknowledge our supremacy?" "I imagine you tell us," Sophie said. Her voice sounded almost normal, though it was pitched slightly higher than usual. Thoxor turned to face her. "Who speaks?" "Dr. Sophie Blake," she said. "Xenobiologist." "A scientist," Thoxor said. "Then you will appreciate the elegance of our methods. We do not waste resources on crude warfare. We have mastered the art of biological and chemical submission. One deployment of our fear toxins, and entire populations surrender within hours." He gestured, and one of his warriors stepped forward, holding a small device. The warrior pressed a button, and a faint mist sprayed into the air around the humans. Jake felt nothing except a slight tickle in his nose. The mist smelled vaguely like cinnamon. Around the room, the other aliens pressed themselves even flatter against the walls. Some were making sounds of distress. "You should be experiencing overwhelming dread," Thoxor said, watching them carefully. "Your hearts should be racing. Your minds should be screaming at you to flee or submit." Jake glanced at Sophie and Kyle. Both of them looked completely fine, apart from the obvious effort they were putting into not laughing. "I feel fine," Jake said honestly. Toxor's whiskers twitched faster. "Increase the dosage." The warrior sprayed more mist. Jake sneezed once. That was all. "Interesting," Sophie said, pulling out a small scanner from her pocket. "May I take readings?" "You dare to analyze our weapons?" Thoxor demanded. "I'm just curious about the mechanism," Sophie said, studying her device. From these readings, it appears to be targeting specific neurotransmitter receptors. Fascinating work, actually. Thoxor stared at her. His nose twitched rapidly. I'm more intrigued than terrified, Sophie admitted. Then she caught herself. But I'm sure it's very effective on other species. Very impressive engineering. One of the Zarkoth warriors bounced aggressively toward Kyle. It performed what was clearly meant to be an intimidating movement, jumping up and down while making a chittering noise. The warrior's cheeks puffed out with each bounce. Kyle turned his head away sharply and covered his mouth with both hands. His entire body was shaking. Are you well? Thoxor demanded. Just a cough, Kyle managed to say. Something in the air. The warrior bounced harder, its tiny feet leaving the ground by several inches with each jump. It waved its weapon around in what was supposed to be a threatening manner. Kyle made a sound like he was dying. He stumbled backward and practically ran toward the exit. Lieutenant Chen requires medical attention, Lisa said quickly. Technical difficulties with his translator. Please excuse him. Kyle disappeared through the door. Faintly, they could hear laughing from the corridor beyond, though it was quickly muffled. Thoxor looked suspicious. Your species seems weak, unable to withstand even a basic demonstration of our power. 1. We're just adjusting to the station environment, Jake said. His face was starting to hurt from how hard he was clenching his jaw. It's our first time off Earth. 1. Then let me make the situation clear, Thoxor said. He gestured, and his warriors moved into an even tighter circle around the humans. The Zarkoth Empire has dominated this galaxy for 3,000 years. We have conquered 200 worlds. We have crushed every rebellion, destroyed every resistance, and broken every species that dared to challenge us. He paused dramatically. One of his warriors released more smoke from somewhere. Another made a deep drumming sound. You have two choices, Thoxor continued. Submit to our authority willingly, or we will demonstrate why no one defies us. We grant you 1 cycle to make your decision. Lisa opened her mouth to respond, but Sophie made a strangled noise. A tiny laugh had escaped despite her best efforts, coming out as a squeak that she tried to turn into a cough. Thoxor's ears perked up. Did you just laugh? No, Sophie said quickly. Definitely not. Just clearing my throat. It sounded like laughter. I assure you, Supreme Commander, I take your Empire's power very seriously, Sophie said. But her voice wobbled on the last word. Jake could feel his own control slipping. The situation was absurd. They were being threatened by creatures that his daughter kept as pets. The Zarkoth even moved like hamsters, with the same quick scurrying steps and the same habit of standing up on their back legs to look around. 1 cycle, Thoxor repeated coldly. With that, he turned and marched out of the hall, his warriors following in formation. The smoke machines worked overtime as they left, filling the room with gray haze. The moment the doors closed behind them, Sophie bent over and started laughing so hard she could barely breathe. The emergency meeting room was smaller than the greeting hall, but somehow felt more oppressive. Counselor Vextar paced back and forth. His blue skin had gone almost white with stress. Around the table sat representatives from a dozen species, all of them looking at the human delegation with expressions that ranged from horror to pity. This is a disaster, Vextar said for the 3rd time. An absolute disaster. Ambassador Lisa Hartman sat with her hands folded on the table, maintaining her diplomatic composure. Beside her, Captain Jake Morrison looked calm, though his jaw was still tight from the effort of not laughing earlier. Dr. Sophie Blake kept her eyes down, still fighting occasional giggles. Lieutenant Kyle Chen had rejoined them after composing himself, though his face was still red. With respect, Lisa said carefully, I'm not sure I understand the problem. We didn't laugh at the Supreme Commander. At least, not openly. Not openly? A reptilian alien named Seth hissed. Your lieutenant fled the room. Your scientist made sounds of amusement. Even your captain showed clear signs of suppressed mirth. They noticed, another alien added, wringing several tentacles nervously. The Zarkoth are experts at reading body language. They know you were not afraid. Should we have been? Jake asked. The room went silent. Every alien stared at him. They are the Zarkoth Empire, Vextar said slowly, as if explaining to a child. The most dangerous military power in the galaxy. They have crushed civilizations. They have exterminated entire species who defied them. By making them afraid, Sophie said quietly. She had pulled out her scanner and was reviewing the data. That fear toxin they used. It's sophisticated. Targets specific neural pathways. Triggers panic responses. Shuts down rational thought. It would work on most species. But not on humans, Jake said. Sophie shook her head. Apparently not. Our brain chemistry must be different enough that their compounds don't bind properly. We felt nothing. That's impossible, Seth said. Their weapons affect everyone. Except us, Kyle said. Which explains why we're the first species to not run away screaming when they bounce around and squeak at us. They do not squeak, Vextar said sharply. Yes, they do, Kyle replied. The translator tries to hide it, but you can hear it underneath. High-pitched, like small rodents. You must never say that to them, Vextar insisted. The Zarkoth are extremely sensitive about their size and appearance. They compensate through displays of absolute dominance. Questioning that dominance is fatal. Lisa leaned forward. Counselor, help me understand. If their main weapon is psychological warfare, and it doesn't work on humans, what actual military capability do they have? The aliens exchanged glances. We don't know, Vextar admitted. No one has ever fought them. They arrive, deploy their fear weapons, and everyone surrenders. It has been this way for thousands of years, so they might not have any real military power at all, Jake said. Or they might have weapons beyond imagining, Seth countered. We have never needed to find out. Until now, Sophie said. She looked at Lisa. They gave us one cycle to submit. What happens if we refuse? The trials of subjugation, Vextar said, his voice dropping. They will challenge you to prove your worth through combat, strategy, and endurance. No species has ever passed. Most surrender halfway through out of pure terror. But the terror weapon doesn't work on us, Kyle pointed out. There are other dangers. A small alien with large eyes said nervously. Physical combat. Tactical challenges. Exposure to their most fearsome warriors. The psychological pressure alone has broken stronger species than yours. Jake looked at his team. Sophie had stopped giggling and now looked thoughtful. Kyle's expression had shifted from amusement to calculation. Lisa watched them both with the careful attention of someone evaluating options. We need to discuss this privately, Lisa said to the council members. Of course, Vextar said. But please, consider carefully. The Empire does not forget insults. If you cannot show proper fear, at least show proper respect. Through submission, the aliens filed out, leaving the 4 humans alone in the room. Thoughts? Lisa asked immediately. They look like hamsters, Kyle said. I had a hamster when I was 8. His name was Butterscotch. That's not helpful, Lisa said, but there was a hint of a smile on her face. Actually, it might be, Sophie said. She pulled up an image on her tablet showing various Earth rodents. The resemblance is remarkable. Similar size, body structure, facial features. The Zarkoth have clearly evolved along parallel lines to Earth's small mammals, which humans have domesticated as pets, Jake said, understanding. That's why we can't take them seriously. Every instinct we have says these are cute, harmless animals. But they might not be harmless, Lisa warned. We don't know what weapons they actually possess. Then we need to find out, Jake said. If we submit now, we're setting a precedent. Earth becomes another conquered world, paying tribute to an empire of hamsters. And if we refuse? Sophie asked. We face the trials, Jake said, and we learn exactly what the Zarkoth can actually do beyond making people afraid. Kyle nodded. I agree. We can't let Earth's first major diplomatic contact be a surrender to psychological warfare that doesn't even work on us. Lisa was quiet for a moment, thinking. This could go very badly. If they have real weapons, real military power, we might be starting a war. Or, Sophie said, we might be freeing the entire galaxy from 3,000 years of intimidation-based tyranny. That's optimistic, Lisa said. I'm a scientist, Sophie replied with a slight smile. I believe in testing hypotheses. The hypothesis here is that the Zarkoth are actually dangerous. Let's gather some data, Lisa sighed. You all understand that I'm supposed to be the voice of caution and diplomatic restraint? Yes, Jake said. And you're all still determined to do this? Yes, all three replied. Then, I suppose we should inform the council of our decision, Lisa said. She stood up and straightened her uniform. But when we get home, and I'm explaining to the president why Earth's first contact resulted in combat trials against an empire of space hamsters, you're all writing the report. 20 minutes later, they stood before the Galactic Council once more. Councillor Vextar looked hopeful, as if expecting them to announce their submission. We have reached a decision, Lisa announced formally. Humanity declines to submit to the Zarkoth Empire. We will face the trials of subjugation. The hall erupted in shocked murmurs. Several aliens made sounds of distress. You cannot be serious, Vextar said. We are completely serious, Jake confirmed. This is suicide, Seth hissed. Or it's discovery, Sophie said. We'll find out which. A deep gong sounded through the station. The doors at the far end of the hall opened, and Supreme Commander Thoxor entered, this time without smoke or drums. He marched directly to the center of the room, his small legs moving quickly. The humans have made their choice? He demanded. We have, Lisa said. We will not submit. We accept your trials. Thoxor's whiskers twitched rapidly. His small black eyes studied them with clear calculation. For a moment, without the theatrical effects, he looked less like a terrifying warrior, and more like a small animal, trying to understand something unexpected. Very well, he said finally. The translator made his voice sound cold, but Jake caught the hint of uncertainty in the original squeak. The trials will begin tomorrow, at the combat arena. Prepare yourselves, humans. You are about to learn why no species defies the Zarkoth Empire. He turned and left, his warriors following. But Jake noticed something he had missed before. The warriors kept glancing back at the humans, with expressions that might have been confusion, or might have been concern. Well, Kyle said once they were gone, at least we'll get some answers. Or we'll die horribly, Sophie added. Always looking on the bright side, Jake said with a slight smile. Vextar approached them slowly. I hope you know what you're doing. So do we, Lisa said honestly. So do we. The combat arena was impressive. It stretched the length of 3 football fields and was surrounded by viewing platforms filled with representatives from dozens of species. Every seat was occupied. Apparently, watching humans face the trials of subjugation was the biggest event to hit Unity Station in decades. Captain Jake Morrison stood in the human preparation area with his team. They had spent the night researching what little information existed about the trials. Most accounts were fragmentary because few species made it past the first challenge before surrendering. Remember, Ambassador Lisa Hartman said quietly, we're trying to be diplomatic. No laughing, no matter what happens. We'll do our best, Dr. Sophie Blake promised, though her expression suggested she had serious doubts about maintaining composure. A deep gong sounded. The arena lights dimmed, and then brightened in a rhythmic pattern clearly designed to create tension. Supreme Commander Thoxor appeared on a raised platform across from them, flanked by his warriors. Let the trials begin. His translated voice boomed across the arena. First trial. Psychological endurance. The arena floor opened and a platform rose from below. On it stood a large screen and various devices that hummed with energy. You will witness the most terrifying images ever compiled, Thoxor announced. Scenes of conquest, destruction, and the absolute power of the Zarkoth Empire. Species have gone mad from exposure to these recordings. Steel your minds, humans. The screen flickered to life. Dramatic music began to play. The first image appeared. A Zarkoth fleet in battle formation. Jake bit his lip. The ships were small, painted to look aggressive, and arranged in patterns clearly meant to be intimidating. They were actually kind of cute, like a toy armada. The next image showed Zarkoth warriors in full combat gear, standing in perfect ranks. The camera angle was low, making them appear larger and more imposing. But Jake could see the tiny steps they took to maintain formation. "This is what awaits those who defy us," Thoxor's voice narrated over the images. "Total domination. Complete subjugation. Endless defeat." More images flashed past. Zarkoth flags flying over conquered cities. Warriors performing synchronized movements that were clearly meant to be terrifying military drills. Supreme Commander Thoxor himself, shot from below to maximize his apparent size, gesturing dramatically while giving what was probably meant to be a spine-chilling speech. Sophie made a small sound. Jake glanced at her and saw she was biting her hand. The video continued for 10 minutes. It showed the same themes repeatedly: power, dominance, fear. The Zarkoth were experts at propaganda. Jake had to give them that. If their psychological weapons worked on you, these images would be amplified into pure nightmare fuel. But to humans, immune to the fear chemicals, it looked like a very elaborate hamster documentary. When the video finally ended, Thoxor stared down at them from his platform. "Well, are you ready to surrender?" "That was very impressive cinematography," Sophie said carefully. The low camera angles were particularly effective. Thoxor's whiskers twitched. "You are not terrified?" "Should we be?" Jake asked honestly. There was a long silence. Around the arena, the watching aliens whispered among themselves. Thoxor conferred with his advisors, their small heads bobbing together. "Very well," Thoxor said finally. "Trial 2. Physical combat. Choose your champion." Lieutenant Kyle Chen stepped forward immediately. "I'll do it, and I shall choose our greatest warrior," Thoxor announced. "Bring forth Drakzul the undefeated." The arena floor opened again. More smoke poured out. Drums began beating, and through the haze emerged what was clearly meant to be the most terrifying Zarkoth warrior ever bred. Drakzul was perhaps 4 feet tall, larger than average for his species. His armor was black with red accents. Spikes protruded from his shoulders and helmet. He carried a staff weapon that crackled with energy. His face was set in what was obviously supposed to be a fearsome scowl. He looked like someone's pet hamster dressed up for a fantasy convention. Kyle walked to the center of the arena to meet him. Drakzul immediately began his pre-combat ritual. He bounced aggressively, his tiny legs propelling him several inches off the ground with each jump. He spun his staff weapon around his head. He made loud chittering sounds that his translator rendered as intimidating war cries. "You face Drakzul," the warrior squeaked through his translator. "Undefeated in 100 combats. Surrender now, or be crushed." "I'm sure you're very skilled," Kyle said respectfully. He was clearly trying very hard not to smile. Drakzul responded by bouncing even more aggressively. His cheeks puffed out with each bounce, making him look like he was storing nuts for winter. Kyle turned away and put his hand over his mouth. His shoulders shook. "You dare laugh at Drakzul?" the warrior demanded. "Not laughing," Kyle managed to say. "Just stretching. Combat preparation." The judge, a neutral alien from a species Jake didn't recognize, signaled the start of the match. Drakzul immediately charged forward, his tiny legs moving in a blur. He swung his staff weapon in a complex pattern. Kyle sidestepped easily. The staff whistled past him, missing by several inches. Drakzul bounced again, repositioning. He attacked from a different angle. Kyle blocked with his forearm and the staff connected with a loud crack. The weapon's energy discharge tickled slightly. "Your defenses are weak," Drakzul announced. "Prepare for defeat." The warrior launched into a spinning attack, his small body rotating like a furry top. Kyle simply took 2 steps back and watched him spin past. When Drakzul stopped spinning, he looked slightly dizzy. He shook his head, his ears flopping, and charged again. This time Kyle caught the staff mid-swing. He held it gently but firmly, preventing Drakzul from pulling it free. The small warrior tugged and pulled, his feet scrabbling on the arena floor. "You fight with honor," Kyle said, trying to sound serious. but I think this match is over. He lifted the staff slightly, and Drakzul came off the ground, hanging from his own weapon. The warrior's legs kicked in the air for a moment before Kyle gently set him back down and released the staff. Drakzul stared up at him, breathing hard. His whiskers drooped. "You are very strong for such a large creature." "Thank you," Kyle said. "You're very quick." The judge signaled the match over. Kyle had won without throwing a single punch. Drakzul walked back to the Zarkoth platform with his head down, looking dejected. Thokzor stood rigid on his platform. Trial 3. Strategic Command. "Captain Morrison, you will face me directly." Jake nodded and moved to a new section of the arena where holographic displays had appeared. This was clearly some kind of tactical simulation. "We will each command a fleet," Thokzor explained. "The objective is to secure the central zone. Whoever controls the zone for 1 full minute wins." The simulation began. Jake studied the holographic battlefield quickly. It was relatively simple. A basic control point scenario. He positioned his ships efficiently, creating overlapping fields of fire. Thokzor's approach was more dramatic. His fleet moved in elaborate patterns, performing complicated maneuvers that looked impressive but served little tactical purpose. Jake simply held the center zone with concentrated firepower. Thokzor's ships danced around the edges, unable to break through without taking heavy losses. "You fight without artistry," Thokzor complained. "Where is the drama, the spectacle?" "I'm trying to win," Jake said simply. Frustrated, Thokzor deployed what he announced as his terror fleet. A massive wave of tiny holographic ships appeared, hundreds of them, all moving in synchronized intimidation patterns. They were so small, so many of them, all bouncing around the battlefield in formation. Jake pressed his lips together hard. The terror fleet looked like a swarm of very organized dust motes. Sophie, watching from the sidelines, made a sound like a dying balloon. She had both hands pressed over her mouth. The terror fleet performed a complex spiral maneuver that was clearly meant to inspire awe and fear. Instead, it looked like a screensaver. Kyle started laughing first. He tried to hide it by coughing, but it came out as loud snorts. Sophie joined in moments later, no longer able to contain herself. Even Lisa's professional composure cracked, and she turned away with her shoulders shaking. Jake held out for another 10 seconds before a laugh burst out of him. He tried to stop it, failed, and ended up bending over with laughter. Around the arena, the watching aliens looked horrified. But the humans couldn't stop. The terror fleet, the bouncing warriors, the tiny supreme commander trying so hard to be intimidating. It all became too much. Thokzor stood on his platform, staring at the laughing humans. His whiskers trembled. His small paws clenched into fists. "You dare," he said, his voice shaking with rage. "You dare mock the Zarkoth Empire." Jake tried to compose himself. "We're not mocking you. We're just laughing," Thokzor finished coldly. "Something no species has ever done before. You will regret this insult, humans. You will regret it deeply." The private meeting room was small and quiet, far from the chaos of the arena. Dr. Sophie Blake sat alone at the table, waiting. She had requested this meeting directly with Supreme Commander Thokzor, and after 2 hours of tense negotiation with various council members, he had agreed. The door opened and Thokzor entered, flanked by 2 guards. He walked to the chair across from Sophie and climbed onto it with small, dignified movements. Even sitting, he barely reached the height of the table. "You wish to speak," he said. His translator was turned down, and Sophie could hear more of his natural voice underneath. It was still high-pitched and squeaky. "Yes," Sophie said. "I wanted to apologize." Thokzor's whiskers twitched. "An apology? How novel." "We didn't mean to be disrespectful," Sophie said honestly. "What happened in the arena was not mockery. It was recognition. Recognition of our weakness, you mean?" "No," Sophie said firmly. "Recognition of something from our own world." She pulled out her tablet and set it on the table, turning it so Thokzor could see the screen. She pulled up images of Earth's small mammals. Hamsters, guinea pigs, mice, gerbils. Thokzor stared at the images. His small black eyes widened slightly. What are these creatures? We call them rodents, Sophie explained. Small mammals native to Earth. They've lived alongside humans for thousands of years. And they look like us. Very much like you, Sophie agreed. The resemblance is remarkable. Same size, similar features, comparable body structure. Thokzor was quiet for a long moment, studying the images. These creatures. How do humans regard them? Sophie hesitated, choosing her words carefully. We keep them as companions. We care for them. Protect them. Find them endearing. Children especially love them. Endearing, Thokzor repeated. The word seemed to physically pain him. You find us cute. I know that's not what you want to hear, Sophie said gently. But yes, to humans, you resemble animals we have deep positive associations with. That's why we couldn't maintain fear. Our instincts override logic. Thokzor climbed down from his chair and walked to the window. He stared out at the stars for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. For 3,000 years, we have ruled through terror, he said. Our ancestors discovered that most species could be controlled through biological fear responses. We built our entire civilization on that principle. Our weapons, our tactics, our culture. Everything designed to inspire dread. It was effective, Sophie said. Until you, Thokzor said. He turned back to face her. Your species is immune to our primary weapon. And worse, you find us adorable. I understand this must be difficult, Sophie said. Difficult? Thokzor gave a small, bitter laugh. It is the end of everything we have built. Once word spreads that humans feel no fear of us, others will wonder why they were ever afraid. Our empire will collapse. Or it could change, Sophie suggested. Thokzor looked at her sharply. Explain. Your empire doesn't have to be based on fear, Sophie said. You have advanced technology, sophisticated strategies, a strong organizational structure. Those are real strengths. You've just been using them in service of intimidation instead of cooperation. We are warriors, Thokzor said. That is our identity. Then be warriors who protect instead of conquer, Sophie said. Work with the council instead of dominating it. Use your abilities to help instead of harm. You make it sound simple. It's not simple, Sophie admitted. But it's possible. And humans could help. Thokzor's ears perked up slightly. Help how? We could be partners, Sophie said. Your psychological warfare doesn't work on us, but that means we can give you honest feedback and genuine advice. We can help you transition from an empire of fear to an empire of cooperation. And in return, you teach us what you know. Your technology is advanced. Your tactical knowledge is extensive. We're new to the galaxy, and we have much to learn. Thokzor walked back to his chair and climbed up again. He studied Sophie carefully. Why would you help us? We threatened your species. Because I'm a scientist, Sophie said with a slight smile. And I believe in finding solutions to problems. Right now, you have a problem. Your entire civilization is built on something that doesn't work on humans. That's a crisis, but it's also an opportunity to be humiliated, an opportunity to evolve, Sophie corrected, to become something better than what you were. There was a knock at the door. Captain Jake Morrison entered, followed by Ambassador Lisa Hartman and Lieutenant Kyle Chen. Thokzor's guards tensed, but he waved them back. We've been discussing your offer with the council, Lisa said. They're cautiously interested in the idea of a human Zarkoth alliance. Cautiously terrified, you mean? Thokzor said dryly. That too, Lisa agreed. But fear is not a good foundation for diplomacy. We'd prefer to build something better. Jake stepped forward and, moving slowly so as not to startle anyone, pulled something from his pack. It was a small stuffed animal, a hamster toy that Sophie had asked him to bring from the horizon. I know this might seem insulting, Jake said carefully. But on Earth, We give these to people we care about. It's a gesture of friendship. He set the toy on the table. It was soft and brown, with a friendly expression and tiny paws. Thoxor stared at it. This is how you see us. This is how we see creatures we want to protect, Jake corrected. We don't keep rodents as pets because we think they're weak. We keep them because we value their company. Because they bring us joy. Joy. Thoxor said softly. He reached out one small paw and touched the toy. No species has ever looked at us and felt joy. Well, now one does, Sophie said. The question is what we do with that. Thoxor was quiet for a long moment. Then he picked up the toy, holding it carefully in his small arms. If we agree to this alliance, things must change. We cannot simply abandon 3,000 years of culture overnight. We don't expect you to, Lisa said. Cultural change takes time, but we can start with small steps. Joint research projects, technology sharing, diplomatic cooperation, and in private, Thoxor said, looking at the humans. You will help us understand how to interact with species who are not afraid of us. Yes, Sophie promised. We'll teach you what we know about cooperation-based relationships. It's what humans are good at, Kyle grinned. Plus, if anyone else gives you trouble, they'll have to deal with us first. And we're not afraid of anything, because you are from a death world, Thoxor said. I have read your species file. Earth is classified as one of the most dangerous planets in the galaxy, which means we're very good at surviving, Jake said, and protecting those we care about. Thoxor looked down at the stuffed toy in his arms. I need to consult with my advisors. This decision affects our entire empire. Take your time, Lisa said. We're not going anywhere. 3 hours later, the Galactic Council reconvened in the main hall. Every species was present, all of them watching anxiously as Supreme Commander Thoxor stood at the center of the floor with the human delegation beside him. The Zarkoth Empire has made a decision, Thoxor announced. His translator made his voice loud and clear. We are entering into a formal alliance with the human species of Earth. Shocked murmurs filled the hall. Several aliens looked faint. This alliance represents a new direction for our people, Thoxor continued. We will be working with the Council instead of against it. We will be sharing our knowledge and learning from others, and we will be protected by a species that does not know the meaning of fear. He glanced up at Jake, who stood beside him. The height difference was almost comical, but neither of them seemed to care. The galaxy is changing, Thoxor said, and the Zarkoth Empire will change with it. Counselor Vex Tar approached cautiously. This is unprecedented. The Empire has never allied with anyone. Then it is time we started, Thoxor said. He still held the stuffed toy, though he had tucked it partially under his arm as if trying to be casual about it. There is one condition, Jake said to the assembled council. If the Zarkoth are going to change their ways, the rest of you need to give them a chance. No more fear, no more tribute. They're our partners now, which means they're under our protection. Several aliens looked uncomfortable with this idea, but none argued. Apparently, no one wanted to challenge a species that had just laughed off the Zarkoth Empire's best intimidation attempts. As the meeting ended and species began to file out, Sophie walked beside Thoxor. How are you feeling? She asked quietly. Terrified, he admitted. Which is ironic, given our specialty. Change is scary, Sophie agreed. But you're not facing it alone. Thoxor looked up at her. You truly believe we can become more than what we were? I know you can, Sophie said. Because that's what humans do. We change, we adapt, we grow. And now we're going to help you do the same. Thoxor clutched the stuffed toy a little tighter. Perhaps being seen as cute is not the worst thing that could happen to us. It's really not, Sophie said with a warm smile. Trust me, humans will defend cute things more fiercely than they defend themselves. And so, with laughter as the catalyst and friendship as the foundation, the Zarkoth Empire began its transformation from galactic terror to galactic partner. The galaxy would never be quite the same again.